Greg recently discussed a SCOTUS decision restraining DEI indoctrination, a depressingly small victory. We know how it ends. Jesus has overcome the world. But today, it's a depressing world. Any suggestions, Greg and Amy, to battle culture-induced melancholy?
Well, of course, we all have to deal with this. And because we're all living in this culture and we're mindful of the impact of error and lies, cultural lies, on individual people and groups of people, the decisions that culture makes, the trends in culture influence lots of people. So influences a lot of people. They influence. So I'm sympathetic, obviously, to this. I'll tell you what I do. I don't watch or listen to the news, and I don't read news periodicals. You mentioned, I'm not sure if it was, maybe it was just a little earlier, that there's so much happening in the world that we cannot do anything about. And if we can't do anything about it, then why worry about it? Why? On the one hand, I mean, people have argued it's helpful to know what's going on. Okay, kind of. But on the other hand, when you learn about all the things that happen and all they do is generate anger and not confusion, but depression, what's the point? Why continue to go over that? Now, there's a passage in Philippians that is meant to be applied to individuals, but I think can apply to broader issues too. And Paul says, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there's any excellence or anything worthy of praise, let your mind dwell on these things. Well, that's dealing with individuals, I think, but it certainly has application for culture. Why dwell on some thing that's happening in culture that you don't like and have no way of making a difference on? And sometimes and I don't know if we were beefing about something earlier off the air, but I got into something. I said, well, I can't do anything about that. I'm just let it go. I'm not going to talk about it, something political or policy-wise or whatever. So one way to deal with the melancholy, I think, is to not, what's the word I'm looking for, not obsess on all the bad things that are going on that we have no capability of having an influence on. Now, you and I have a little bit different kind of capability because we have a bully pulpit. We have a radio show, or we have a podcast. We have thousands of listeners, so we can influence thousands of people by working on certain ideas and communicating that. That does help. But most people don't have that bully pulpit. And so if you don't have that ability to influence lots of people and change the circumstances, then there's not much you can do about it. Why fuss and worry about it? Why focus? Last thing you do is evening news before you go to bed. First thing you do, newspaper, news reports, or whatever when you get up. No wonder you're melancholy all day long. You start the day bad and you end the day bad. I'd rather start the day not with all of that stuff. And it isn't that I don't check some things out, but I don't obsess about any of this. And the news things that I do focus on a little bit more are things that are appropriate to my field, are things that I can speak on, I can do something about. So a couple of weeks ago, there was a news report about suicide trends and how the concern is that suicide is going to become a social contagion, a fad. Okay? Most people can't do anything about that. We can. So I can talk about it here and have a broader impact. So I have a certain lane that maybe is broader than most people. But even so, I don't do deep dives into all this new stuff. I learn what I need to learn to serve the needs that I can serve, and then I don't obsess about the other stuff. I just let it go.
And this goes back to what I said about only carry what you were meant to carry. Mm-hmm. We have a limit to what we can influence. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean you don't look at anything, but it just means you have a realistic understanding of what you can do. And again, you can influence people around you, even if you don't have a radio show. But I think when we're talking about how to combat the melancholy that comes about as you feel all these things are just coming down on this culture and we seem to be losing. Again, I just go back to the end of the book.
Right.
And this is how
I do too.
This is how God chose to encourage the Christians, the early Christians. He had John write Revelation. And Revelation is the declaration by God that he wins. So no matter what it looks like now, so no matter what suffering we're going through now, that is the future. And I honestly think this is the key to our keeping going on these things. Now, all you have to do is look at the big picture of the whole Bible. Look at the prophets. Look at Jeremiah. He was the weeping prophet. Look at the horrible situation he was in. But look what that led to ultimately. Mm-hmm. That wasn't the end of the story. Look at Moses. Now, when Moses first talks to Pharaoh and says, you got to stop, you got to let my people go. And then what does Pharaoh do? He makes their job harder.
Right.
And everyone says, this is terrible, but stop trying to help us. This is the worst. But of course, that is only the middle of the story. And we know that God actually rescued them out of there. So we can't have this short-term view of all of reality. We have to be aware that God wins, and we have to keep reminding ourselves of that. And then also, when you look at the fact that God uses terrible things to accomplish good things. So, for example, the cross. Mm-hmm. The worst sin ever committed happened on the cross, and it was the best thing that ever happened to us. And think about when he was dying on the cross, how the people felt at that time, how the Christians felt. It seemed like the end. It seemed like everything was over. Nothing worse could possibly happen than this. And I imagine they were pretty depressed. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't just something that was going to change. That was actually the means that was going to bring the victory.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Momentary light affliction, Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 4, is producing for us an eternal way to glory. And I like that passage because, in part because of the power of the verb. It is the affliction that is producing this thing that's going to be better than it would have been had we not had the affliction. Better for us in eternity, where neither moth nor rust destroy, nor thieves break in and steal, as Jesus put it. So I do take refuge in that a lot. It is painful. I think the American experiment was noble and produced for 200 years something magnificent, which is why people from all over the world have been clawing at our borders trying to get in and be part of the American dream, if you will, the American culture, all the good things that we have that are a result of godly men who built something based on a Christian understanding of reality, a Judeo-Christian understanding of reality with checks and balances and all these things to make it work. And then to see all of that kind of deteriorate before my eyes, not just in one lifetime, but just in the last 15 years, to see so much of this just completely disappear. It's painful. Mm-hmm. I don't want it to go away. I value the appropriate liberties that we've had, and I think it's created good for good for human beings, and there was human flourishing was the result. But nevertheless, all the kingdoms of this world are going to all crumble ultimately, before the kingdom of our Lord is ushered in. And that's going to be, of course, so much better than all the others, obviously. But it's painful going through the process. And so this is why looking at the end game is so important for us.
And again, it makes such a difference to me, or at least this is what I focus on, to varying degrees of success in overcoming the melancholy. But it makes such a difference to know that it's not just that, well, God's losing for a little bit right now, but then he's going to come back. that's not the same as saying, actually, what is happening right now is furthering God's plan in some way,
Yes. Uh-huh.
even though it's fighting against God. And this is why in Acts they quote that the psalm about why do the nations rage against God? It's completely futile because
Psalm 2, yeah.
yes, because God is they can't ruin God's plan in any way. God is using even things that they're doing to rebel against Him to further His own plan. So if we can just take some rest in that and continue and know that we suffer now and we have glory later. That is the way Peter describes it.
The temptation is to look for it all right here in this life, and there's wonderful things to be had in this life that God has appointed for us, a great world that He's made. But of course, sin corrupts everything, and so it's not going to be as we like it in this life. There will be a time when the earth will be as we like it, and we're going to be back on earth, one that's remade and it's not broken, and be enjoying things beyond what we could even imagine.